Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, say the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. There's a lot of information in these verses. We're not going to study all of that tonight. These verses bring to view the beast. What is the beast? What is the image of the beast? What is the mark of the beast? And of course, it introduces the angel that does the sealing. But we have no time to address these in the short time that we have here. Let us take a look at the fundamental aspect of the third angel's message. All of these things are there, but there are certain things that are fundamental. One of the fundamental things that we can read as we have just read those verses, Revelation 14 verses 9 through 13, we find the result of these messages. So we need to understand this is the result. And keep in mind from Wednesday night, it's the result of what? Of the third angel's message? Is that what the result is? The first, second, and third. They're all combined. It's the result of all three. And it says, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. In other words, the result of these messages, by studying these messages, applying these messages, the result is what? Keeping what? The commandments of God. You have a people that are keeping the commandments of God. When we say the commandments of God, what are we talking about? I want you to pay attention in Psalms 119, verse 142. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is what? The truth. Okay, so remember we were studying what is present truth. Okay, we were looking at the importance of truth, and we learned Wednesday night that truth is who? Who is the truth? Jesus Christ. Okay, so Jesus Christ is the truth. And this is why here, when you read this, it's thy law is what? Is the truth. So the truth and Jesus Christ are actually the same. They're exactly the same thing. And so when we're evaluating truth and we want to have the truth in our hearts, we're talking about having what? The law of God in our hearts, which simply means having Jesus in our hearts. When a person chooses not to accept the commandments of God, what are they doing at the same time? What are they refusing? Notice 1 John 2, verse 4. He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Okay, so a person says, I don't need to keep the commandments of God, or it doesn't. Some people don't say they don't need to keep the commandments, they just don't keep them. Okay, and what does that mean? That means the truth is not in him. Oh, who is the truth? Oh, that means that Jesus is not in him. Okay, it's quite simple. Okay, so if you have Jesus Christ in your heart, you have the commandments in your heart. If you reject Jesus, you reject also the commandments of God. That's a natural response here. This is why when we're talking about Reformation, especially the Reformation in the last days, it has to relate to the law of God. In volume 6, 119, it says, the great reformatory movement must begin in presenting to fathers and mothers and children the principles of the law of God. So when we were talking about Reformation, a reformatory movement, they're all related clearly to the law of God. That means you need to start teaching who? Fathers, mothers, and children. By the way, who's left out? Who's left out? Nobody's left out. Okay, so fathers and mothers and children, what? The principles of the law of God. So the law of God is a fundamental aspect of Reformation. Even when we're talking about reforms, there's a lot of things that you can get involved with to make a reform. Okay, it's interesting in Spanish countries, they don't have the word renovate to renovate a house. Did you know that? There's no word to say renovate. Do you know what they say? Reform. Are you reforming the house? Yeah, you're reforming. Why? You're reforming. That's what reformation is. It's a change, a complete change. And when we're looking at in the time of the end, this is Prophets in Kings 6:78, in the time of the end, every divine institution is to be restored. Now, what does it mean to restore the divine institutions? It goes on. The breach made in the law at the time the Sabbath was changed by man is to be repaired. God's remnant people, standing before the world as reformers, are to show that the law of God is the foundation of all enduring reform, and that the Sabbath of the fourth commandment is to stand as a constant memorial of creation, a constant reminder of the power of God. Tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit more about the power of God. But notice here that the law of God is the foundation of what? Of all enduring reform. There's a lot of good ideas that we need to modify, okay? There's a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of issues that are happening in this world. And sometimes we may be tempted to chase every one of those issues. Okay? But that's not our message. What is it? The foundation is not all these other issues. The foundation is what? The law of God is the foundation of all enduring reform. And this is why when we're looking at the result of the three angels' messages is the people that are keeping the commandments of God. And what is promised to those who keep the commandments of God? It says, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. You know, that they may have what? Right. Why the right? Why the right? I thought we don't deserve it. Huh? We don't deserve this. How can you have a right when you don't deserve it? Huh? You think you earned something to go to heaven? You don't earn it. Let me ask you a question, young lady back there. Yeah, you. Okay, let me ask you a little question here. When you go to your where you're living, when you go to your house, okay, do you think that you have the right to be there? Do you have the right to be there? Do you go there and look around? Do I belong in here? Do I not belong in here? Do you ever do that? Or do you just walk in? What do you think? You just walk in? Why do you just walk in?
Because I know that's my house.
Oh, it's your home. Okay, so you're actually coming home, right? And because you're coming home, you don't have to sit there and feel uncomfortable, right? It's your right. So what happens to those that keep the commandments of God? What happens? They're going home. That's why they have the right, because they're going home. Okay, you didn't buy the house. You didn't do anything, but it's your home. And because it's your home, you have what? The right to go there. Hey, that's an amazing thing. We're going home. That's what's happening. You see, that's why to those that keep the commandments. Now, keep in mind, we must keep what? Okay, for whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. Now thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. And that's why it's imperative for us, when we're studying the three angels' message, actually to study every commandment. And it'll be good to you all to do sometimes a series on all the 10 commandments. Go through them one by one. Here in church, go through one by one all the 10 commandments. And some of them may take quite a bit of time. It won't be just one sermon. It may be several sermons. Okay, why? Because we need to understand all of them in order to do what? To keep them. You can't keep them if you don't know what it means. Okay, so we need to explain what it means. So when we're looking at this law, what has to happen to the law of God? In Isaiah 8:16, bind up the testimonies, seal the law among my disciples. What do you need to do with it? You need to seal it. You see, so the law is so important, it needs to be sealed. This law is the foundation of everything. And Isaiah 8, 19 and 20. And when they shall say unto you, seek unto them that have familiar spirits, and unto wizards that peep and that mutter, should not a people seek unto their God, for the living to the dead? And now notice, to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to this word, it is because there is what? There is no light in them. It's not complicated. There is no light in them. And now, so how do you know if there's light in somebody or not? How do you know?
They speak according to the law.
Oh, but if you don't study the law, you won't know. That's why it's important to go and what? Study the law, to understand the principles of the law. And this is why when we're looking at the three angels' messages, part of it is to study the entire law. And sometimes we get excited about one commandment. How many times I hear people say, oh, these people are just like us. They keep the Sabbath. There's all sorts of, the Jews keep the Sabbath. Are they like us? No. Okay, there's more than one commandment. Okay, and that commandment, keep in mind, when we talk about God, do you worship God? Who's God? Which God? Did you know there's lots of gods around? There's gods all over the place. Okay, so how do you know which is the right one? It's quite simple. Isaiah 45:18 tells us, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens. Okay, which Lord? Which God? The one that created the heavens. God himself that formed the earth and made it. He had established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is what? There is none else. Why there's none else? Because none of them create. Okay, not one of them can create. No God can create. No false God can create you. He cannot create heaven and earth and people. Just can't do it. They're trying. I mean, scientists are doing all sorts of stuff to try to create life. Okay, they're trying to make life. They're trying to do this. And they can't make life. They can make the outward looking, but it just doesn't function. Why not? Because they're not God. You see? So when we're looking at the Ten Commandments, there's only one commandment that identifies that God. And this is why when people talk about worshiping the true God, why the Sabbath is so critical. Because it's the only commandment that identifies God. The other commandments, you can have any other God. You can have any other God. You know, I was just listening to an interview of a young lady. She escaped from North Korea back in the about 10, maybe a little bit more, 10, 15 years ago. And there, she was saying, they were teaching them to worship the president, Kim Jong-un. Worship him. He is God, okay, everything. And then what she's surprised is when she heard about Christians and they were telling her the Ten Commandments, it was the same Ten Commandments. Exact same Ten Commandments for Kim Jong-un. Exact same thing. Okay? Why? If you remove the Sabbath, you can put Kim Jong-un in there. You can put anybody in there. But the Sabbath is the only one that identifies the genuine God. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor the stranger that is within thy gates. Why? For, or because, in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the Sabbath day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Why? Because he identified himself as the Creator God. There is no one else. So now, since the Sabbath is the only one that identifies God as the Creator, therefore the seal of God must be in this identifying commandment. Okay, it's not Saturday worship. Saturday worship is not the seal of God. Okay, the seal of God is worshiping the Creator properly according to all 10 commandments. And then we need to know who is being sealed. Notice Revelation 7. 2 to 4. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. So you find here that the Sabbath has a seal. Then the seal, there's people that will be sealed that identify with that Sabbath properly, and that is called the group of the 144,000. So let's look at the context of these messages for a moment, just because context is really important here. Okay, so when we just read Revelation 14, 9 through 13. Okay, now, in order to understand where that takes place, we need to understand what happens after verse 13. And what happens after verse 13? And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head the golden crown, and on his hand a sharp sickle. Another angel came out from the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. What happens as soon as the 3 angel messages are complete? What happens? There's a harvest. That means that these 3 messages must be given just prior to the second coming of Christ, to the time of the harvest. So now, we've read some of these messages already. Okay, but let's start with the beginning of the chapter. You know, sometimes we start with verse 6. We forget that there's verses 1 to 5 there. And verses 1 to 5 are really important because it sets the context of the 3 angels' messages. So after the 3 angels' messages is the harvest, and the chapter begins with what? And I looked, and lo, a Lamb of God, a Lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. So the context of this chapter begins with the sealing of the 144,000. It begins with that as a goal, because we need to understand. The first part of the chapter tells you the goal. What's the goal? Sealing. Okay, when is the sealing completed? By verse 13, 12 and 13. Okay, because it gives you character traits. The character trait in verse 12 is what? Keeping the commandments of God. Okay, we'll show you in a moment that this is the same context. So here you have the Lamb on Mount Zion. This is not beforehand. This is clearly the Lamb on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. So let's just look at the context here. So we begin with the first angel's message. Okay, that's what it's clearly, they must begin with the first angel's message, verse 6 and verse 7. Then you must have the second angel's message, which is verse 8. And then you have the third angel's message, okay, which is 9 through 13. And then you have what? These 3 messages combined, when you combine all of these 3 messages, what they result? They result in people that are keeping the commandments of God. You understand this? And those who keep the commandments of God are the 144,000. That we're going to show you that in a moment here. So here, clearly, understanding and accepting the first, second, and third angel's message, when you combine those 3, you end up with a group of people that keep the commandments of God. These are the 144,000. And when you have the 144,000, you are ready for what? What are you ready for? The harvest. You're ready for the harvest. It's simple. Okay? So let's take a look. Who are sealed? Okay, verse 2 and 3 now. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Keep in mind, verse 1, they saw the 144,000 on Mount Zion. And they sung, who is the they? Who is they in this context? The sealed, which are 144,000. Okay. And they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. No one can sing the song except who? The 144,000. Okay. So now what song are they singing? In chapter 15, you find verse 2 and 3, the song. And I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over the image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass having the harps of God. Okay, keep in mind, Revelation, the third angel's message is what? Do not receive what? The mark of the beast. Do not receive the image of the beast, nor the number of his name. These are all part of the third angel's message. And so here you have a group of people who had gotten the victory over all those things that you find in Revelation 14 in the third angel's message. And they sing the song of Moses. Oh, they're singing what? The song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, thou King of saints. And the song of Moses was when? When they came through the Red Sea, when they had gotten victory over all the Egyptians. So basically, the 144,000 are the victorious ones that result from the first, the second, and the third angel's message. That's who they are. Okay? They are victorious over the beast, the image of the beast, and the mark of the beast. That's how they are victorious over all of that. So now, how do these 144,000 relate to women? So we start with verse 1. It's the 144,000. And then verse 4 says, These are they which are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. Now in the Bible, when we're studying the Word of God, we find that women symbolize what? What do they symbolize? They symbolize a church. Okay, a woman in Bible is symbolic of the church. Now, there are different kinds of church. It says here they are not defiled with women. So what kind of churches are defiled? Okay, these would be impure women. Okay, impure churches. Okay, so you see, so in this case, if you read this combined chapter 14 with chapter 17, you find that this impure woman is Babylon. That's who she is. It's an apostate church. So that means that those who are sealed, the 144,000, they are separated from Babylon. And that's why you have the second angel's message. You can't have sealing of the 144,000 without the second angel's message. You can't have the third angel's message without separation from Babylon. There has to be a clear-cut separation. And so when someone is talking some of the points of truth, it doesn't make them third angel message. Okay. You have to have what? To be the third angel's message, you have to have what? First, second, and third angel. Not some aspects of it. Because separation from Babylon is clear. And that means those who are sealed, they are what? They're clearly separated from Babylon. Now let's look about their character. Still in Revelation 14. You know, and there's a lot of stuff to study here. We're just kind of little touching it, okay? Just barely touching each one of these points, and they're critical. But I want you to understand what's involved here. Okay, when we go to verse 5, and in their mouth was found no guile, for they are what? Without fault before the throne of God. What does it mean to be without fault? Are you without fault? Oh, we have to be without fault. This is something that we have to experience. So when it says here without fault, to what extent are they without fault? The same verse, verse 5. And in their mouth was what? No guile. In their mouth was what? No guile. What does it mean in your mouth is found no guile? James 3 verse 2. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. That means that we're talking about those who are sealed. They are what? They have to be perfect. How do you understand perfection? It's connected back to the Ten Commandments. How do you obey the Ten Commandments? You first have to understand them. That's why we need to study the Ten Commandments. Each commandment, to understand the meaning of each commandment so that we can have an understanding of them and that we can depend upon the power of God to change our life and character. And so this 144,000, when you're looking at these character traits, sometimes we study the 144,000 and I keep hearing people say, you guys are crazy. It's impossible to be such a small number. Oh, can't be literal, can't be this, that, and the other. You know why people say those things? You know why? It's very simple. The reason they say those things, because I found out over the years, is because they have no idea what it means to be sealed. Because when you start studying the character to be sealed, you start asking the question, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. Help me to be changed so I can be that character. And then the next question is, where on earth is God going to find that many people? Seriously, that's what we're talking about. That's why it's important to study these things. So now, that means the 144,000, they are perfected. That means they perfectly obey the 10 commandments of God. And since these develop their character by the final 3 messages, then it's important to study those traits of the 144,000. Look at the character traits. So when we look at obedience, okay, so when we're looking at how do you get to have certain character traits? Notice here, one of the character traits is what? Here is the what? Patience of the saints. Patience. What does patience mean? What does it mean to be patient? Patience has, it's a very important word, and that's why you need to study even this character trait of patience. And this 144,000 have that character traits. But one of the biggest problems with patience? Do you know what disturbs patience the most? Do you know what throws us off the rail when we're talking about patience? You know what it is? There's something that comes prior to patience. Did you know that? And in Peter's ladder in 2 Peter 1 verse 6, it says add to this, and then it says add to knowledge temperance, and to temperance what? Patience. So before you can be patient, what do you need? You have to be temperate. And temperate includes diet, includes a lot of things. It's not just temperance in eating. Some people are very temperate in eating and they have no exercise. Okay, you got to have a proper exercise. You need to go to sleep properly. You need to do all these things. There's a whole bunch of stuff involved in this temperance. Okay, so when someone tells me, this issue of temperance and health reform and all these things, they're not that important in the plan of salvation. Well, they're missing the whole point, because you can't be patient then. If they're not important, that means you don't value patience. So these things are connected. And this is why in volume 6 it says, the gospel of health has able advocates, but their work has been made very hard because so many ministers, presidents of conferences, and others in positions of influence had failed to give the question of health reform its proper attention. They have not recognized it in its relation to the work of the message as the right arm of the body. When properly conducted, the health work is an entering wedge, making a way for other truths to reach the heart. And notice this. When the third angel's message is received in its fullness. So we're talking about, when we say third angel's message, what are we talking about? First and second as well. So when we accept the first, second, and third angel's message in its fullness, health reform will be given its place in the councils of the conference, in the work of the church, in the home, at the table, and in all the household arrangements. Then the right arm will serve and protect the body. That's a very important principle. This is a prophecy here. That the more we accept the third angel's message, the more health reform is given its proper place. Now keep in mind, what part of the body is the health reform? The right arm. But that's not the body. Okay, sometimes I find people, they get all excited about health reform, and that's all they want to talk about day and night. Everything revolves around health reform, but that's the right arm. Imagine if the right arm becomes the body. You'll die because you don't have a heart and you don't have anything else. Okay, they have to be in its proper place, okay? But when they're put together in its proper place, they will be there to protect, to serve, and to protect the body. we also find that there is something that goes hand in hand with the keeping of the commandments of God. In Revelation 12:17 it says, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God," and have what? The testimony of Jesus Christ. The testimony of Jesus Christ. Now in Revelation 19:10, it tells us what is the testimony of Jesus Christ? The spirit of prophecy. Very important for us. Now, as we approach the very end, we're going to have certain tests that we go through, right? There's going to be a lot of tests. And as we're looking at the very end of time, we're looking at the final test. You heard about the final test? You heard about the final test? So there's different tests, and then there's the final test, right? What's the final test? What's the final test? What's the final test? Depends who you're talking to. Okay, so let's understand something. There's different final tests, okay? There's a final test in kindergarten. There's a final test in second grade. There's a final test in university. Okay, they're not all the same final test. And so there's some for those who are in the world, the Sabbath Sunday issues the final test, yes. But to those who are studying this message, those who have the present truth, it says the very last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimonies of the Spirit of God. It doesn't say to throw it away. It says to do what? To make it of no effect. That's what it is. So somebody can sit there and say, I believe the testimonies, but they make it of no effect. They're doing exactly the same thing. So now, we've learned just in principle what the third angel's message is. There's a lot of points to study here, isn't there? You can have a seminar for the next 2 years here on this subject, okay, that we have kind of introduced here. But I want us to look at what are we to do with it, because it's not just enough to have it. Okay, God gives us something for a reason. What's the reason that we have for this? First of all, the truth needs to be somewhere. It says in Proverbs 3, verse 3, "Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck. Write them upon the tables of thine heart." You see, what the truth needs to happen with us, it has to be written upon our heart. In other words, the three angels' messages need to be written upon our heart. Why? Because when we're teaching it, it's very important to know how to teach it. The scripture reading read in the beginning was Ephesians 4:15. But speaking the truth how? In love. It's not enough just to speak the truth. You can speak the truth, and the way you say it makes it offensive. That's not the truth anymore. You have the right words, but the wrong attitude. So speaking the truth in love may what? May grow up into Him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. So in other words, we need to know how to teach this message. But to know how to teach it, it must be in our heart first. It must be a part of us. This is why in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 11, of course, says that God's going to send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie. Who? It says here, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth that they might be saved. So in order for us to teach the truth in love, what must happen first? I must love it. Do you love it? Or is it something just there? Something that you have to do? Are you in love with the truth? You know, when we talk about being in love with the truth, you know, when a person is in love with somebody, it changes everything, isn't it? When you find somebody and you're in love, suddenly everything changes. Okay, it's the same thing. Because remember, the truth is who? Jesus Christ. Okay, so when we're loving Jesus Christ, when we receive the love of Jesus Christ, and which is character, because when you're in love with somebody, you're not just in love with anything, you're in love with what? With their character traits. Okay, when people get married, what happens? It's the character traits that keep them together. Sometimes you find people separating. Why? Because their character traits are in a problem. And as I told somebody the other day, we were talking about something else, but we were talking about difficulties with people. And I said, when you and I are having a problem, guess what? There are 3 possibilities. And we don't think about that. There's 3 possibilities. You could be wrong. Did you know that? You and I have a problem. You could be wrong. Did you know that? Is that possible? Oh, that's possible. Okay. We don't often recognize that, but that's possible. Is it possible that I'm wrong? Well, that's also possible. Is it possible that we're both wrong? That's also a possibility. We have to analyze it. You see, we don't think about that. It's either you or I are wrong, right or wrong. Okay, it can't be anything else. Yeah, there is one more. Both of you can be wrong. Okay, you can be missing the whole point. You see, but so what has to happen is when we're loving the truth, that helps us when we're going through difficulties. It helps us through everything. When you're in love with Jesus Christ, it helps you go through different trials. And it's not just in love at the beginning. You know, when we have a baptism, everybody's all excited. You're excited at your baptism. Everything else is all excited. It's the best day of my life, etc., etc. But it says, and ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake. But he that what? Endureth unto the end, the same shall be saved. So it's not just beginning that walk, but what? Finishing the journey. It's to go all the way through to the end. To what extent are we to be in love with this truth, you know? Volume 5, this statement always stayed in my mind. It says, those who would rather die than perform a wrong act are the only ones who will be found faithful. Wow, they're what? Willing to die rather than perform a wrong act. That's the big challenge. And you do that, you're willing to die only when you're in love. Okay, when you're not in love, what happens? You evaluate and say, okay, I'm not ready to die for this yet. Okay, this can go. But when we're in love, we're willing to die for that. You know, when we're talking about the test that we're going to have, we imagine all sorts of things as being our test, you know. But here's the test. When the religion of Christ is most held in contempt, when his law is most despised, then should our zeal be the warmest and our courage and firmness the most unflinching. To stand in defense of truth and righteousness when the majority forsake us. To fight the battles of the Lord when champions are few. This will be our test. You know, when I used to study with people getting ready for baptism, one of the questions I asked them during the evaluation of preparation for baptism is, you're all excited about getting baptized right now? Yeah. Okay, now I want you to think about something. What happens if everybody here in church leaves and you're the only one left? Do you think you're going to still be standing for this? And one sister, she told me later on that she had moved to a new location, a different state. And while she was there, almost everybody left the church. And they asked her, what about you? Now's the time to go. What are you going to do? And she says, I was asked that on my baptism. I'm staying right here. I'm not going anywhere. I already thought about that. And she stayed there. She'd rather be alone than to walk out because she thought about it. And we need to be thinking about that. Are you prepared to stand for this when you're all alone? You know, it was interesting. In London, we had started a church there. And we had been renting the place for a while. Different people came there. And one lady, she was actually Catholic. Okay, she had been coming to church, and she was coming to church because her boyfriend actually was a former reformer. Okay, she actually had 2 kids with him, and one day he decided to leave her, and he went his own way. He left her. They never got married. They left her. Okay, and pretty soon the different ones that were coming to church went back to their own countries, and you know, she was all by herself. And you know, every Sabbath, she went to church with her little kids, unlocked the door. She was the only one that had the keys. She walked inside the church and studied her Sabbath school lesson. I think she did it for like a year before other people started coming again. You know, and eventually I was privileged a few years later to actually baptize her. You know, but she was can you imagine? Not even a member, not even a committed member, and she was still there when everyone left. When the majority, not just the majority, everyone left. She was all by herself, and what happens? She still stood there. You see, this will be our test. So now, when we're looking at this message, something must happen with this message. In Matthew 24:14, it says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. What's going to happen first? The gospel must be preached into all the world. That means if we love the truth, what is it going to push us to do? says here we see the great need of missionary work to carry the truth not only to foreign countries, but to those who are near us. Close around us are cities and towns in which no efforts are made to save souls. You know, yesterday I drove out to Huron Shores. Okay, this is about 6 hours. Thessalon, Huron Shores, 6 hours from here, okay? And as I'm driving, I left Toronto yesterday. It was still morning when I left. And as I'm driving out there, I'm paying attention to one thing. You know what I noticed? I noticed no churches of our church. Barrie was quite a nice town. I mean, it took me forever. It took me 2 hours to get to Barrie or whatever. How far is Barrie? 1 hour? 1 hour. What's north of Barrie? What's a big town north of Barrie? Is it bigger than Barrie? That's your last town going up north. How come we don't have a station over there? Oh, this is what we're talking about here. You know, and then you go all the way out, there's absolutely nothing. Why? And I see town after town, village after village, small town here, small town there. You know, we see the great need of missionary work to carry the truth not only to foreign countries, but to where? To those that are near us. You know, close around us are cities and towns in which no efforts are made to save souls. Okay, what about even Toronto? I mean, come on, there's lots of parts of Toronto, and we have what? Nothing? Why should not families who know the present truth settle in these cities and villages to set up there the standard of Christ working in humanity, not in their own way, but in God's way to bring the light before those who have no knowledge for it? You know, we say we got to move out. Some people move out. They move out further, and they travel I don't know how long to come to church. Why don't you start a church? Okay, why don't we make plans? You know, you have a new term now in office. The missionary leader, are you making plans to start new places with these families, to start new things? When the church shall truly have the spirit of the message, they will throw all their energies into the work of saving the souls for whom Christ has died. They will enter what? New fields. They're not going to be satisfied, oh, we have this beautiful church here, it's really nice, okay? You want your church to grow, so keep adding. Go to new places. Yeah, it's nice for the church to be empty a little bit, you know. Right now in Roanoke, you know, we've started actually 3 new groups. Okay, we have the Spanish group downstairs. We have Lynchburg about an hour away, and Charlottesville 2 hours away. And you know, and sometimes they go help in other places. And you know, last Sabbath, the church was practically empty. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Okay, the church, they went to other places to help out other places. We all sit there, oh, we need to all be together. You get all together, you're going to die anyway. So you might as well start sharing the truth and start spreading out a bit. And then get together for conferences. You know, get together, you know, once a month, once a quarter or something like that, where you can see, yes, we are doing something together, but we're doing it separately. And each of those places will grow. You know, if you have, you know, you work really hard for a whole year and you get maybe 1 or 2 baptisms. And I've noticed it doesn't matter whether your church is 50 members or 10 members. Okay, you can end up with what? 1 soul. Can you imagine if you divide it into 10 different groups somewhere, and every year you have one in each one? That means what? That means 10 instead of 1. Okay, that's the exciting thing, you know. So, you know, enter new fields. Some who are not ordained ministers will be laborers together with God in visiting the churches and trying to strengthen the things that remain that are ready to die. You know, we sit there, oh, we don't have enough workers, we don't have enough ministers, we don't have enough, blah, 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 all sorts of excuses under the sun. Well, what about you? Are you a church member? Do you know the message? Have you been trained to give messages? You should be. Learn how to present messages, and then what? Then you go visit some of these places. You know, how are we going to handle, you know, when we have only 4 or 5 workers, how are we going to handle, you know, 4 or 5 new groups? Well, get the members to go out and preach. Those members who know the truth, go and preach to these places. It'll change your life. You see, that's why some who are not ordained ministers will be laborers together with God in visiting the churches and trying to strengthen the things that remain that are ready to die. That'll change your life. It'll radically change who you are. So, we covered quite a bit, didn't we? A lot of stuff here to cover. But in conclusion for this evening, we need to understand something that This present truth that God has given to us, we can't neglect it. We need to study it deeper. The Crest Collection says, and God has not called his people to ignore present truth for these last days and take up a work that so absorb workers and means that the Lord is not represented as he would be otherwise. Sometimes we're too busy doing other things. We need to focus on what is the present truth, and we need to focus on that and share that to the world. And this is why when we say focus on the truth. Why? Because in the presentation to the world, it's not just to go out there and tell people how nice they are. Okay? It says here, no line of truth that has made the Seventh-day Adventist people what they are is to be weakened. We have the old landmarks of truth, experience, and duty, and we are to stand firmly in defense of our principles in full view of the world. That means God has given us special truths as a people. Those things that have been developed by God to us and given to us as a people, they are not to be weakened. Instead, they are to be strengthened, and we are to teach that to the world. And this is why the prayer that we should have to the Lord, as we are looking at all of this, if you would solemnly think about these messages, I think it will radically change the direction of your life. But before it changes the direction of your life, it's going to scare you to death. That's right, it's going to scare you to death. But you know something, when you understand God and you understand God's loving care, you're going to find that God really cares for you. And that when you are going through difficulties, God is going to be there to hold your hand. And this is why Psalm 25 tells us what we should be praying for, what our desire should be. It says, lead me in thy truth and teach me, for thou art the God of my salvation. On thee do I wait all the day. May the Lord help us that we may truly desire to know more and more of this truth so we can finally walk with God for eternity. Amen. Let us sing in closing hymn number 141, An Open Bible for the World. May this our glorious motto be, on every breeze the truth unfurled shall scatter blessings rich and free. Blessed Word of God, send forth thy light o'er every land and every sea, till all who wander in the night are led to God and heaven by thee. Amen.